Fear Zone, your horror channel. Good evening, everyone, and now let's get to today's story, which is about Mr. Yanni, and it happened to him in the city of Topeka, which is in the United States, and at that time it was in the year 2016. Mr. Yanni was 45 years old. And today, I'm going to tell you what I went through, and the scare of meeting a werewolf, in which I had to fight with this creature to save one of my family members. I live in a village far away from the city. One day, as usual, I went to get some bread at the grocery store early in the day, and as soon as I passed a dirt road on the way, I saw a dead dog on the ground. I looked at the animal and realized that the cause of its death was certainly the bite marks of some large beast that had attacked it. I left it at that and carried on walking to the grocery store, and then I bought my bread there. So when I was walking back along the dirt road again, I heard a man picking up the body of the dead dog from the road, and he dragged the corpse into the woods. And after that, which was a very strange thing, I went back to my house. Then I went to work and forgot all about it. A few days later, I was driving home from work in the evening, and I passed that street where there was a dead dog on the road, and that same suspicious guy who pulled the dog's corpse into the woods, and he was walking near a vacant lot, wearing a red shirt. I wondered what that guy was doing at that time, in that dark place. And then I got to my house and saw that my daughter wasn't at home, and my wife told me that she had gone to one of her friends' houses and that the girl would be home soon. At that moment, I remembered that strange guy near the bush. I was already worried, thinking about the guy, who could be some maniac. With that, it gave me a bad feeling, so I took my car. I went to the house of this friend of my daughter, but when I got there, she told me that my daughter had just left. My mind was already racing, so I went to the road where I'd seen that guy in the red shirt prowling around at night. And when I got to the road, I saw something strange in the bushes beside the road. There was a huge animal on 4 legs, and it was eating something on the ground near some bushes, but that it was my daughter, who could have been attacked by this beast. I didn't even want to think about it, but in desperation, I got out of my car quickly to try to see what that animal was eating, and I picked up several stones on the ground and threw them at the creature. And the creature ran growling in pain, frightened, but the beast recovered quickly. This creature got up and stood up like a man. But then it quickly crouched down and stood on 4 legs and would run after me. At that moment, I had no doubt that it was a werewolf, because not only could it stand on 2 legs, but it also had a strange gleam in its eyes. And what I did was to run back to the street and quickly get into my car, but then the creature came up to my car, and it stood up again, and this beast was very furious, and began to hit the bodywork of my vehicle very violently. I quickly reversed the car and tried to run over the werewolf, throwing my vehicle on top of it, but the creature managed to run in time and saved itself from the blow. I turned the car around and tried to run over the werewolf, but the beast ran away through the woods. Well, by this time, I was more worried about what the beast was eating in the woods, and for me, it could have been my daughter, so even though I was frightened by the sight of the werewolf, I still wasn't going to leave that place at all, until I saw what that animal had caught. And the problem with all this was that I couldn't see what that beast had caught, because the bushes in the middle of the vegetation were a bit high, and it was dark in there. So, I waited in the car with the headlights on, and looked in the direction of where the werewolf was eating something, but the creature had already disappeared. After a few minutes, to my surprise, I heard some noises in the undergrowth, and that's when suddenly, the creature ran fast towards what he was eating. I even got out of the car scared not to let that beast get close, but the werewolf took in his mouth by the bush the body of some little piglet, and ran in the vegetation and disappeared. Seeing that, I felt calmer at that moment, because I was glad it wasn't my daughter. Even though I was worried, I got back to my house quickly, and when I arrived at my home, I saw my daughter in the kitchen, so that gave me some relief, and of course, I told her what had happened to me on the road, when I had almost been caught by the werewolf going after her, and this story also served to stop this girl from walking around late at night. However, I spent the whole night thinking about this werewolf, and also that this creature had caught my daughter. I was very worried about this macabre creature walking around my neighborhood. And finally, when the day dawned, I decided to go back to the Werewolf's Road to see if I could do anything against this beast, and arriving at that dirt road, I saw some pieces of the body of the little pig that the werewolf had been eating at dawn. And after a while there, I was already leaving, and that's when I saw a gentleman coming out of the middle of the forest with some clothes in his hands, and this man came to talk to me. He was a farmer from the region. At first, this man told me that he was looking for a guy who had started appearing in the woods during the day and at night around the village, and this country bumpkin thought that it was him who had taken one of his pigs. This man walked through the woods, and the only clue he found was the clothes he found thrown in the undergrowth, and looking closer, I saw that it was a red shirt, and the guy I found in the woods last night, before the werewolf appeared, was certainly wearing those clothes. The landowner said that he was going to chase this suspicious guy, and after this conversation I had with this gentleman, I went back to my house and kept thinking about this whole story. When a few days had passed, I started to think more about that wanderer who was prowling the woods, and the old country bumpkin who found his clothes, and for me, that guy was already suspected of becoming the werewolf who attacked me on the road. After a few days, I met that redneck again, and he told me something strange, that he had found several dead dogs hidden in the woods, and that these dogs had been killed by attacks from some dangerous beast that was in the woods in the area. I became more suspicious of that suspect, who I saw taking that dead dog from the road, and for me, he was hiding the evidence that there was a werewolf in the neighborhood. Well, I even tried to see if I could find this guy when I was driving through the streets of my neighborhood, but I never saw him again. The point is that these werewolves do exist, and their attacks are very violent, and I say that because I've lived through these moments of terror with this creature. And also those dogs that were killed by some animal on the road, I think it was the werewolf that attacked them. And that was my real horror story. Thanks for watching the video, and if you liked the story, subscribe to the channel and leave your like. Fear Zone, your channel of real horror tales. Good evening everyone, and now, let's go to today's story, which is from Mr. Carlos, and this happened to him in the city of Campo Mourao, which is in Brazil, and at that time, which was in the year 2008, Mr. Carlos was 44 years old. And today, I will talk about my story, in which I went after a creature, which was bringing a lot of damage to me, which was actually a werewolf. And it all starts like this. I live in a rural village in my city, where there are many ranches that raise animals from chickens to cows, and in the backyard of my house, which is a farm, I raise goats and chickens. Well, what happened is that at a certain time, I watched a news report on TV, in which an animal was attacking the animals of the sites of my city, and in the report, the story showed that the animal was violent in its attacks, because it destroyed the chickens and goats of the properties. This animal that did this, nobody knew what it was. I was thinking about this situation. Was it true, this television report? However, a week or so passed, and I met a friend of mine, who lived on a farm in my village, and I talked to him, and this bumpkin told me that his animals were attacked at dawn, and many chickens were torn to pieces. So, I was very worried, and thinking that that television report was right, and that there was a dangerous animal prowling the woods in the rural areas of the city. So, after that conversation, I went back to my place, and at night, I took my chickens out of the hen house, and together with the goats, I put all these animals inside the barn that I had in the backyard of my ranch, in case if such an animal came to my place, it would not be able to catch my creations. But what happened? After a few days, I got up during the day and went to look around the farmyard. And I got a scare when I opened the barn door, because some of my chickens were killed and eaten by some animal that got inside the corral. But the most impressive thing is that I wondered how the invading animal was smart, because he managed to open the barn window and got inside, and then he wiped out my animals, and this beast went out the window. At least, it was this logic of what would have happened. Even so, I did not understand how an animal managed to open the barn window, because it would take a certain intelligence to do this. The fact is that I got angry with this animal, so my son and I went into the woods during the day, and we were looking for this beast, which would have attacked my animals. We prowled for almost 2 hours, and we saw no sign of any creature. Well, as nothing came of this prowl, we returned to our house, and then I took my hammer and nailed some nails in the barn window to close it, so that no one could get in there. Then a few days passed, but the animal did not return. One night, I decided to make a round by the yard of my site to see if everything was fine, and when I arrived at the barn, where I kept my chickens, I took a fright, because with the light of the flashlight, I saw that the window of the corral, where I had closed, was all scratched. At the time I got smart, because it was certainly that beast that did it, but this time, he could not open the window to enter my corral. But the problem is that this animal could be nearby. Then I do not know what came over me. I thought of making a trap to capture this beast, because I left the door of the corral open so that this animal would enter there inside, and so I would trap him inside the barn and end this headache that this animal was causing me, that I had to hide my animals in the barn. After I did that, I went back to my house fast and took my rifle. I kept looking at the barn from the window of the house, just waiting for that beast to come back so I could capture it and see what kind of animal this was. The fact is, that time went by, and the beast did not appear, and already around 4 o'clock in the morning, when I was already giving up waiting for the beast, I saw something strange and froze, because I saw a kind of animal on 4 legs, and it was a creature similar to a monkey and half a dog, and this creature was entering the corral through the door that I had left open. And that, I left quickly from inside the house. I went to the yard, and walking slowly and quietly, and I arrived at the barn, and I closed the door of that place, and I locked that beast inside the corral. That beast trapped in there. That animal realized that it fell into a trap, and began to growl loudly, and banging hard on the timbers of the barn. That animal was desperate to escape from the barn. At that time, my dogs realized that something strange was happening, and they came to me, and these my dogs began to bark around the corral, where I locked that creature. But soon, that creature trapped calmed down. With that, I began to look through the gap in wood, and with the light of the lantern, I could see the animal better, but that beast ran from the light of the lantern, and he was trying to hide, and the creature went from side to side, so that I did not see him, but I could see that it was a kind of huge animal with a black coat. However, after a while, this beast began to growl with strange noises, as if it were disengaging. Then it began to roll on the floor, and by the light of the flashlight, I saw that strange animal moaning, as if it were feeling a lot of pain. I was amazed, because the body of that animal was similar to the body of a man, but it was all hairy. But what happened that left me amazed was that suddenly this beast stood up, and he stood, balancing only on 2 legs, and walked with difficulty, and this creature seemed to be stunned, and at that time, it was already very clear to me that this beast it was a werewolf. I was without understanding anything, and scared and confused, because for me, werewolves did not exist. I thought about going back to my house, because of the risk, with this creature in my place. Soon after, my son appeared in the pasture to help me, and by that time, the werewolf had stopped making noise. I started to pass the light of the lighthouse inside the corral to show the creature to my son, but to my surprise, there was a strange man trapped in the corral, and this guy was naked and without any clothes. Then I wondered, did the werewolf become this man? But at that time, the stranger captured asked me to let him out of the barn. I asked him, where was the werewolf who was trapped? The suspicious guy said that only he was in there. I looked again with the flashlight, and I didn't see that werewolf in the corral anymore. Even though I was afraid, I opened the door of the corral and stood a distance of 10 meters from the place with the shotgun in hand and ordered the guy to get out of there. But this guy who turned into a werewolf spoke crying for me to take the dogs out of the entrance of the corral so he could get out. So my son restrained the dogs, and after that, the suspicious man came out of the corral naked and with his hands up. Then I asked again where the werewolf was, and the guy said he didn't know anything about the creature, and he seemed very disturbed. He spoke crying, so I wouldn't hand him over to the police, and he said he had mental problems with his head, and that sometimes he woke up in strange places and that he didn't remember anything. But this guy realized that I was not going to take it out on him, so with that, the stranger took a chance and ran naked, and he jumped over the fence of my place and managed to escape. Well, I didn't go into the bush to hunt him down, but I stayed on alert until dawn, and by daylight, I ended up reporting this naked man who came into my barn to the police, and I described his appearance and roughly his age. But I was amazed with what happened a few days later is that I saw on TV a very strange report in which the police entered a thicket to hunt the animal, which attacked the ranches in my city, but the police in this hunt ended up finding a suspect through the woods who was already wanted by the police, and the suspect confronted the police, and this wanted subject was shot dead by the guards. Finally, soon the television report showed the photo of the suspect who was killed by the police, and I saw that it was the same man who entered my barn and who turned werewolf, and the most impressive is that the press was accusing this guy that it was him who had been killing the chickens of the sites in the rural areas of the city. Well, I found this whole story strange because they never passed this report again, and for me the police went hunting for such a dangerous animal at dawn and found the creature and ended up killing the werewolf in the confrontation, and so the beast turned into a man again. At least for me, that's what happened. But to this day, I stay on alert at night when I walk around my place, and I always take my rifle on rounds because now I know that these creatures exist. And that was my real horror story. Thank you for watching my video, and if you liked the story, subscribe to the channel and leave your like to receive more real horror tales and reports of werewolves and other creatures of the night, creepypastas, and audiobook. Fear Zone, your channel of real horror stories. Good evening, everyone, and now, let's go to today's story, which is from Mr. Peter, and this happened to him in the city of Santa Barbara do Oeste, which is in Brazil, and at that time, which was in the year 2001, Mr. Peter was 30 years old. And today I will talk about what I went through when a creature chased me, but something happened to this beast that brought me a lot of problems after the encounter I had with this werewolf. And it all starts like this. I live in a simple village in my city, and in this region there are many farms and some ranches. And to start my scary story, at that time I worked in a paper mill, but I started to do some overtime in my service, so I ended the workday at 11 o'clock at night. The factory I worked at was close to my village, so sometimes I would walk to my house, but on the way there were several dirt roads, which was a rural place. On a certain Friday, I had finished my work at the factory, and it was close to midnight, so I left the factory and went walking on a road, and after I walked a little, I soon arrived near a stream, and I started walking there, on a dirt road, which was next to this stream. I was walking quietly, until suddenly, I heard a noise in the bush that was next to the road, and I could hear those noises in the woods, and it seemed to be someone, or something that would be walking there, but strangely. When I stopped walking, the sound of footsteps also stopped in the bush. I was on alert, but I still kept walking. But to my surprise, I heard a sound in the bush again, but this time very close to me, and it was rapid footsteps. I turned to look, to see what was happening, and to my amazement, a large hairy animal came out of the vegetation running, and came towards me. At that time I was very scared, because I saw that this animal was going to attack me. I quickly managed to dodge the first attack of the beast, and went down the ravine of the stream, and went across the stream of water. I saw the footsteps of that strange animal behind me, and terrified, I did not stop running. As soon as I reached the edge of the other side of the ravine, I saw that a car was coming at high speed down the street, but I ran in front of that vehicle. But what happened next? Listened is that I heard a very strong banging noise behind me, and I decided to look back, and I saw that animal lying on the ground, and the car stopped in the middle of the road. Seeing that this creature was run over, I stopped running, and I was curious to know what animal was that ran after me. So, I went to talk to the driver, and he told me that he could not stop the car, and with that he ran over the beast, which appeared running down the street. So, we went to look at the animal that was lying on the ground, me and the driver of the car. We went to see what beast was this, and when we got close to this creature, we looked and saw an animal with a very bizarre appearance, and that trying to get up from the ground, but he was very injured, and could not get up, and we were scared, because the body of this beast was kind of like the body of a naked man, but with a dark coat all over his body, and he had human arms with hands, but his nails were big and pointed, and the strange thing was his head, which looked like the head of a monkey, but with dog ears. We were frightened at that moment, but then this beast began to try to recover, because this beast seemed to be afraid of us, and it moved little, until this animal, even well injured, with difficulties, he stood up like a man. At that moment, I realized that this being was a werewolf, because in addition to balancing on two legs, his two eyes had a bright and strange glow, which was something macabre and scary. At that moment, the driver and I were very afraid of this creature standing like us. This monster looked at us scared. I think he thought we wanted to do something bad to him. Well, even that werewolf very injured, he had many difficulties to stand. I and the owner of the car, we did not risk staying there near this creature, and we were moving away slowly from that beast, so as not to attract too much attention, but thankfully, that werewolf did not threaten and catch us, and it seemed that he wanted to get out of there, and the driver was very scared, and told me to get in the car fast. And that I got into the car, but we were watching what this werewolf was going to do, but this monster went to the bush walking slowly and with difficulty, and then he disappeared in the bush. The driver started his car, and we left that place fast with the automobile, and he said and confirmed that that animal was a werewolf. After a few minutes, the driver of the vehicle left me at home. I was amazed by this whole story, and I kept remembering this being all night long, and thinking about the existence of this creature, and I reasoned, if it really is a werewolf, he would come back in the form of a man when the day dawned, and he would be found very injured, or even dead, and could bring problems to whoever ran him over. So when dawn came, and it was daylight, I stayed locked in my house, so no one would know of my call with this story of this trampling, because I didn't know what would happen. I just stayed on to hear from someone if something strange or some person or an animal was found injured by the woods. However, late in the afternoon, a policeman arrived in front of the house, and I went to see what he wanted, and this military man asked me if I had passed by a road where they found a dead man in the morning. Well, I did not lie, and said that a guy in a car ran over a big and strange animal on a dirt road, but that I did not know this guy. The policeman said, so I could go to the police station to make a statement. With that I was scared, but I accepted and arranged to go to the police station. Anyway, but as soon as I arrived at the police station, the delegate only told me to confirm if it was a strange animal that I saw being run over on the road, and he wanted to know what this animal looked like. Then I said that I had never seen such a creature, and that this animal stood and walked on two legs, and that I saw it in front of me, and I said that his eyes were lit up like lights. Strangely enough, the delegate seemed to believe me, but he told me to go back to my house, and maybe he would even call me again, and he warned me not to say anything about the creature to anyone. The fact that I was confused, and I left for my house. But years passed from this werewolf story, and the delegate did not call me. However, I distrust that delegate to this day, because he could know something about this werewolf, in which I reported to him in the testimony, because the delegate did not care, nor did he find it strange that I said that it was a werewolf that I saw, and that the creature was run over that dawn. And of course, I left it there, and decided not to tell my story to anyone, so as not to get into trouble with the law. And to this day, I still live in the same neighborhood, which has many places of woods in this region, and because of that, I avoid walking at dawn, because I don't want to find another werewolf like that through the woods. Anyway, in this scary werewolf tale that I found this creature, the conclusion I know is that the guy who ran over the werewolf, I never saw him again in my life. Well, maybe the driver of the car even left the city. But stay like this, I know what I saw, and it was a werewolf who ran after me, only he got hurt and was run over. And that was my true account of terror I had with the werewolf. If you liked this video, subscribe to our Fear Zone channel and leave your like to receive more stories and tales of real werewolves.